Hi there, everybody. How are you? Thank you, Jill, for that introduction. It's good to see you all. Try and keep yourselves on mute for now, anyway. Like Jill said, we'll have plenty of time to do Q&A and some pitches a bit later on, but we've got a little bit of ground to cover between here and there. And I see that Annie and David, you would like to pitch. I tell you what, with such a small group here, we'll make sure we get to everyone. I kind of anticipate there being more questions in the group chat here as we go along, so we might need to reset the the hand raising type of deal when it comes to pitching. So thank you for taking time out of your Monday evening. We'll go over the basics of the Explore program and answer your questions here. The Explore program has been in existence for, well, we're working on our 10th RFP, believe it or not. And actually, no, it's not our 10th RFP, it's our 10th year. And it's been a really exciting program for the station. And we hope it's been pretty exciting for people that have participated. Here's our little agenda. There we are. So I'm doing the introduction. We are going to walk through some of the basics of the RFP, what to expect, what kind of things KPBS is looking for in the partnerships that we can create. Then I'm going to hand over to Jody. She'll do details, expectations, and deadlines. Then we've got two of our producers that have been through the process previously. Paul Detweiler and Michael Taylor will be joining us as well, and they can give you, we hope anyway, an unvarnished look at the Explore project, and expect that here a little later on. Also, our friends from New Media Rights will be here to talk a little bit about rights and intellectual property, because it's important to remember that this particular project is something that you will own. It does not belong to KPBS, it will belong to you, which means that you'll be required to secure the rights to the materials that you have. And New Media Rights, we've been working with them practically since the beginning, I think, and do a really good job of sort of detailing what those things are. And then we get to the pitches. So without further ado, let's get started. Whoop, and I'm just so ahead of myself here. There we go. So basically, the Explore project is our way to get out into the creative community and help each other serve the community. So at KPBS, we basically, we have, if you will, different constituencies. The largest and most important one simply is the audience, right? KPBS has 4 television stations, 3 radio stations, a very successful website, a digital presence on YouTube, Instagram, and other places as well, including social media, Facebook, etc. We are a fully mature multimedia organization, as a public media organization. Our mission is to serve this community with news and information. So that's our goal, right? And we want to work with you, or people like you, and we have been doing this for 10 years now, to take that mission, right? Have it translated by your creative brain in some way, shape, or form, and then serve our community. Ultimately, the end product that we come up with, and our ultimate goal, is to make sure that that we are serving our community with thoughtful content. It's not really a mystery, but we want to make sure that we're not just recreating the pipeline for commercial TV and other such things. We feel very strongly that the mission of public media is very much the service mission to the community, and we want you to help us, and we can help you to succeed in doing so. We have basically three goals, nice and simple. We want to increase the sense of place. So for a station like KPBS, like any station in town, we've got a lot of national content. We've got stuff on radio, TV, online. NPR does a great job. PBS is, one of the most well-respected news media organizations in the country. A lot of terrific stuff. But that's great because people watch it and people consume it. But ultimately, as a local station, we want to make sure that we have created a sense of place. So when you watch KPBS or consume our content on some platform, that yeah, that's KPBS, and yeah, this is San Diego. So we reflect the community. Goal number 2, increase diversity of people, ideas, and perspectives. And by the way, this is not just in front of the camera, it's also behind the camera. We've been really, really fortunate to work with some terrifically talented people. And as we'll talk about a little bit going on, is we really want to tap into your creative spirit and have your ideas and your perspectives and your stories come through this process. This is not about making you or making your idea right for KPBS. This is about, taking your brilliant idea and making it happen on KPBS in a way that really serves the media within, the core values of our organization. That's what I mean by increasing the diversity of people, ideas, and perspectives. Everybody has an important story to tell, and we're here to help make it happen. And the last thing, and I'd like to say KPBS has been pretty successful in doing this, is that we want to increase our profile as a source of high quality content. Now, this is for not just the constituency out there as the audience. We want our audiences to know that this is where they can find high quality local stuff, but also for people like you. And like I said, we've been really, really fortunate. We've worked with upwards of 35 different producers over the past 10 years in creating local content. And, I dare say most of them have been quite positive. And Paul, the check is in the mail. No, just kidding. So Paul will say nice things about KPBS. He'll also be very, very honest with you. It's not an easy process, but we want to be your partner in producing it for all of our audiences. So moving right along. What do we bring to the table? KPBS is going to commit the platform, multimedia, that is multiple platforms to promote it and to share your content, promotion, events, and funding plans. So we want you to, when you work with us, to feel like you're being taken care of. You maintain the rights. And the reason that's important is because we've come to the realization over the years that it's not important for us to own it. It's more important for you to own it and for you to be able to hold the copyrights and the intellectual property, because that's your thing. Our thing is through this partnership, sharing your story with the greater public here in San Diego through the platforms, multimedia platforms, et cetera, events, et cetera, et cetera. And it also provides, to be very frank with you, it also provides a lot of motivation on your part, because after you sign that contract and we're underway, it becomes real. The money that KPBS provides to seed projects, I think, is respectable, but it's not enough to fund everything. So one of the questions that you'll have to answer is this: do you really believe that you have the money to make up the difference between what KPBS will seed and what you need to complete the project? You don't need to answer that today, but do think about it. We can help you with some funding. Pardon me. We can help you with some funding plans, and we have some avenues that we can give you some advice on. But ultimately, that funding gap, will really be your responsibility. And there's a lot of motivation when it's yours, right? When you've got the intellectual property, it also gives you a chance to think a bit creatively about how you do that. So what we want to do, and I believe that we have done through the Explore program over the years, is that we've created this cycle of cultivation, creation, and renewal, right? Is that we've had some successful programs come through the Explore project that are still with KPBS at various levels, be they TV shows or podcasts. And, we really feel like it's been a pretty mutual beneficial relationship that KPBS has had with local producers. Okay. Okay, I'm just going to check chat here as I bring my mouse around. Are these just pitch ideas here, Jill? Is there anything that? Okay, so just pitch ideas. All right. If you guys have like legit questions as we're talking about this stuff, and I'm pointing over here because that's where my screen is. That might seem kind of weird, but if you guys have legit questions you want me to stop, you can just raise your hand, a little electronic hand here on Zoom, and I'll stop and answer your question. If it looks like we've got mostly pitch ideas in the chat, that's cool. But if you have any specific question about this, anything I'm talking about, just raise your hand the electronic way. Okay, moving right along. I talked a few minutes ago about core values of public media. So it is safe to say that not every project is a good fit. Okay, I'd like to say that we're pretty liberal in our definition of core values of public media, and we're pretty liberal in our definition of what works for this project. We've taken some risks that I've been really, really happy with, and some things just haven't turned out. But you guys are professionals. That's the way these things happen. So these are the core values of public media. This is the kind of stuff that that we at KPBS or in the public media world in general, we really embrace this. This is the stuff that we eat, sleep, and breathe. So for your project to be successful, or for your project to potentially be funded through this process, think about these, right? These core values: idealism, inspired about public life and culture, belief in civility and civil discourse. This is a really big one, especially nowadays, as we continue to navigate the troubled waters of politics. If you listen to or you consume public media news and information from NPR, PBS, or KPBS, it's civil discourse. It really, really is. That's what we believe in. We believe in generosity. We believe in being kind to our audiences. We believe in being kind to our interviewees and our subject matter. We treat it with respect. We have a real sense of purpose here. We want to help our audiences make the world a better place. Full stop. That's no easy thing to do, right? So keep that in mind. Love of lifelong learning. I mean, especially on the television side, people who watch public television really enjoy it because they get to go places they've never been before, probably never will be, right? And really continue to learn about the world that we live in. Substance, curiosity, credibility, honesty, those are the kinds of things that we're looking for. So as you think of your topic, your idea, just keep in mind that this is sort of the filter in which we're looking. Now, I'm not saying that we won't, accept anything, at all that doesn't fit these things, but keep this in mind because this is the culture that we're in. That diversity of ideas is so important to us. And respect for the audience is the same thing as generosity and sense of purpose. All right, any questions about the core values there that I just shared? Good with those? All righty. Fair enough. Next. So we're going to talk about, there are 4 phases. Oh, thanks, Paul. Thumbs up. So there are 4 phases to this process. We have, believe me, over the years, done our best to simplify it and making it as user-friendly as possible. The first one is the request for ideas, in which we are right now. The RFI, as we like to call it, opened July 1st and it will close September 1st. So we're about halfway through it. So if you have any ideas, do check it out. FYI, if you haven't, kpbs.org/explore is the place to find all of this information. Coming up after the RFIs close and we start to sift through all of the submissions with the help of Jody and the Film Consortium, we'll come out with a list of requests for proposals. So from that big, huge pool, then we'll winnow down to a smaller, manageable group, probably of 30 or so projects, from which we'll ask for a full RFP. That'll happen in the fall. Then we'll go through, pretty substantial pitching and assessing process. Then we'll go through a pilot production for a small number of those RFPs in the springtime. And then the final production, the final awards will be given out at the end of, or June of 2022, with a launch of July 2022. Just for your information, if this is important to you, it's important to us. KPBS works on fiscal years that start in July and end in June. So we have just begun our fiscal year. And so this fiscal year is what we call generally the RFP process, which is this right here, right? So next fiscal year, beginning in July of 2022, is when the production starts. So all the work we're going to do right now is going to lead up to a project or 2 or 3 or whatever the case might be that hit the ground running as of June 2022. And those projects will use the fiscal year 23 to produce and then be submitted by, May, June of 2023. Okay, any questions about that? Okay, we'll go into each one of the phases in a little bit of detail. Don't forget that this is being recorded, so you'll have a chance, and this will be on the website, so you guys will have a chance to see this. So again, kpbs.org/explore is the place to go. There are lots of details on the entire process, but also that is where you'll find the form through which to submit your idea. If you go there, and I'm looking at it right now, on the top right-hand side, underneath the Give Now button is a button blue. It says Submit Your Idea. Now, the RFI form is fairly straightforward. You're going to give us a synopsis. What is it that your idea is? Format, whether it's a TV show, otherwise, a description of it, and a genre. The ideas, or I'm sorry, the the amount of information you're giving us is not meant to be exhaustive. We want you to pitch us as best you can in what is essentially an electronic version of your elevator pitch. Pitch us your idea, why you think it would be important, why you think this needs to happen, why you think this is something that KPBS needs to get involved in, et cetera, right? And again, give it some thought, right? I think we're only looking for 500 to 1,000 words. So it's pretty short, but that's by design. So we want you to really give us the best that you can in those short descriptions. We are looking for almost all format projects for project formats. Thank you. Everything from TV series, something like Crossing South, Ken Kramer, Growing Passion. We have a list. Again, there's a list of them on the website here. All of those shows originated through the KPBS Explore program. Short docs / narratives or feature documentaries. Actually, when Paul talks a little bit later, he'll talk about his experience with San Diego's gay bar history and how that came to be. So we're also looking for documentaries that will fit. Web series. KPBS has been, I don't want to say dipping our toe. We're getting a little bit more meaningful and a little bit more serious about YouTube these days. As a matter of fact, we have begun to post segments of Crossing South and Ken Kramer on YouTube, and we've had some pretty good success doing it. So if your particular project is not right for TV, maybe it's something that's a little bit more niche, maybe it's something that's a little bit more short, whatever it might be. We're looking for web series as well, and those primarily end up on YouTube, possibly Facebook, etc.
Hey, John.
Podcasts I want to talk about. Yes.
We had one question from the group.
Oh, yes, thank you.
Can the same pitch be made for either for both TV and web series and or podcast? Or do we need to select one format when pitching?
Good question, Dave. And the answer is try and keep it, try and keep it simple, because, what we've discovered over the years is that, the simplest and most effective way to give us an idea is to focus on one platform. One of the things that will happen is that, let's just say, for example, you come up with an idea for a series, a TV series. Let's just say TV series. It's a video series of some kind. Well, it might be that through the production process, we hit upon the idea that maybe there are shorter versions of that can end up on YouTube. So I guess what I would recommend is that, focus on, one media at a time, video versus audio. I'll also be very honest with you. There are very, very few podcasts that work as TV shows or TV shows that work as podcasts. There are very few, far between. Okay, so I would recommend focusing on one platform. Just keep it simple, right? Pick the one that you think is the best way to tell that story, and then we'll go from there. Okay,
and one more,
sound good, Dave?
And one more follow-up on that. Do you want to talk at all about the distinction or the distinctions between content for broadcast on TV and web series?
Sure. Yeah. You mean as far as the, thanks, Dave. Yeah. As far as the rights are concerned, Jill, or just?
No. Well, what I gather from the question being asked is, how do you decide whether it's content for a web series or content for broadcast?
Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah.
So I would say from my standpoint, it would be sort of an issue of length, but maybe you want to speak to the content itself. There's a little gray area, I think, but.
Yeah, I would rely on, that's a very good point. I mean, I would rely on the producer's discretion when they submit these things. I mean, you should have a really good idea of whether it deserves to be a TV series or a web series. You know what I'm saying? Because a TV series, and this is where we're going to rely on your guys' experience, when you're producing for TV, it has a bit of a different zeitgeist than if you're producing for a, like a YouTube series. You know what I'm saying? So maybe, Dave, this is what you're getting at, or I know, Jill, that's what you're asking. I mean, it's like, this is where your guys' expertise comes in. You should know. I mean, if you can't, forgive me, if you don't know what platform to submit it on, then don't, okay? Because there's going to be 300 submissions. I guarantee it. and it's going to be really, really competitive. So I can't stress enough that you guys need to, you really need to be clear about what you want to do, what story you want to tell, and the platform you want to tell it on. And I'd recommend that you use a platform you're pretty familiar with, because, because like I said, you're going to need to get this thing done rather quickly within a 12-month period. So we rely on you to tell us what platform this is going to be and how you're going to tell that story utilizing what would generally be considered broadcast versus a podcast, which is different. That's a different storytelling style, right? Or a web series that we make for YouTube. That makes sense? Specific time limits for each. Yeah, Laura, typically the TV shows are half hour, 26:46 to be exact. Documentaries tend to be, whether it's a half hour, 26:46, an hour, 56:46, 90 minutes, or 86:46. If we're making something for broadcast, we kind of do want to fit within those time windows, because as Jill will no doubt say, it makes it a hell of a lot easier to schedule them when they come in those acceptable windows. It makes our job easier to make your content easier to screen. As far as podcasts, to be honest with you, podcasts, anything longer than a half hour is too long these days, really. Joe Rogan, love him, but there's only one Joe Rogan. And, we've discovered over the years, especially in the public media world, that any podcast, it has to be really, really, really good if it's going to go past 30 minutes. Web series, anything for YouTube, it kind of depends. 5 minutes, 10 minutes, maybe 15 minutes. So those tend to be a bit shorter. Okay, thanks. What else is next here? Bouncing around. How many ideas will be selected to submit a full proposal, and then how many proposals will be selected? Oh, I'll get to that. Thank you. Good question, Meredith. I'll get to that in a minute. And Dave, one follow-up: is an individual producer discourse? No. You can submit as many ideas as you want. Make them clean and clear, distinct ideas, though. We will judge each and every one of them on their merits. Okay. Okay. Moving right along. Oh, one thing I want to say about podcasts is that podcasts are a thing, right? And what we've discovered through the Explore project over the years is that podcasts are tough to do well. And we recognize that podcasts as an art form, as a storytelling art form, is relatively new. And there's a lot of great ideas out there that we're just looking for the best way to execute them. So I'm going to take a pause here. There are 2 books. If you're interested in doing a podcast, there are 2 books I suggest you take a look at. One of them is this. Can you see it? It's called Make Noise. All right. It's written by Eric Newsom. Make Noise, A Creator's Guide to Podcasting and Great Audio Storytelling. Written by Eric Newsom, former colleague of mine at NPR and Audible. And it's a really very good, usable book on podcasting. Make Noise, Eric Newsom. The other one, hot off the press too, by the way, this is pretty cool. NPR's Podcast Startup Guide. All right. This you can get at the NPR shop. I'm not sure where else you can get them. Filled with very practical information. And the reason I bring those 2 things up, and I don't have anything about doing a TV series, is again, because we've realized that TV or documentaries are a fairly mature art form that people tend to know how to do. The proposals we get for TV series or documentaries are much more well-baked than the podcast ones. And what that means, if you read between the lines, is that we haven't had a great amount of success with podcast submissions. So every year they get better, and every year we're doing what we can to make it happen. Anyone here on the call, or anyone who watches this, if you're thinking about doing podcasts, please do some homework and read through these books and spend some time asking yourself what the podcast is about and who your audience is. Okay. Thank you for that. And again, our deadline is September 1st. So it's coming up. By the way, if you have any questions during the submission process too, we're available to answer them. Okay, am I missing anything here? No. Okay. Next, phase 2, request for RFP. So from the RFI comes the RFP. We're good at acronyms at KPBS. So we will have, no joke, 200 to 300 200 to 300 applications, I'm sure of it. And it'll take us a little while to sift through them, but from them, we will probably go out to about 30 or so individual proposals for an RFP. And the RFP, then it's sort of like okay, it's sort of, we're dating, right? Now we're going to date a little bit more regularly, and we're going to have higher expectations about what goes on. The reason we're asking for the RFP after the RFI and not the other way around is because we thought it was unfair and it was an onerous task to go through 200 RFPs. So this way, we read through the the elevator pitches and we move on to the RFPs. Like I said, about 30 or so, depending on what we get. We're looking for a little bit more detail, a little bit, a narrative on the treatment, production plan and timeline, resume, samples of work, et cetera, et cetera. That's when, we'll really get into the question of, can this be executed? Because once we go through this process, right, eventually we're going to have to, and we write a contract, it's going to be, okay, can you execute? The deadline for those, the proposals will be November 1st. And we anticipate being able to give you guys plenty of time to make that deadline. Okay. Phase 3, I know we're at 7, so I need to pick it up here a little bit. Phase 3 is pilot production. So what happens then is that after we go through the RFPs, we'll be sifting, we'll do some pitching, we'll do pretty extensive conversations. Those RFPs are a really good way for us to get a sense of the scope of the project and spend some time with the producers, get to know you a lot more, and really figure out where you're going with this kind of stuff. Then we go to pilots. So of the 30 or so, proposals we'll end up getting, of those, it has been our habit to fund about 10 pilots, 10-ish pilots, again, depending on where we are. We do fund pilots, by the way. It's not a lot of money, but it's sort of shows you that we're committed and we understand that nothing is for free, but we fund a pilot. It can be an episode of a trailer, a scene, like a scene that demonstrates the vision, concept, and execution of the idea. It can be an interview, can be whatever it might be. This again is something that we'll decide when we get to it. These the pilot process is something that we get to usually after the first of the year. So sometime in January, probably, we'll start reaching out, and when we'll talk about commissioning pilots. So that gives you, like February, March, April to do the pilots, gives you some good time. There'll be a lot of back and forth talking about what the creative vision is for it. And then they need to be delivered by June of 2022. And then what happens is the production. So basically June 2022 is basically the end of all that work, all that process of sort of like, kind of figuring out who we want to work with. And then by the end of June, then we'll be able to make some contracts and then move forward with our producers. Blah, 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 blah. I'm reading my own text here to make sure I don't miss anything. KPBS will fund projects based on scale and sole discretion of KPBS. I want to just reiterate, we've usually funded between $30,000 and $50,000 worth of projects, but projects plural. And we've been, I think, pretty smart about funding projects that we know kind of through this entire process are going to, embody the spirit of public media, but also reflect the great diversity of this community. Take some risks where we think it's a good idea to take risks, and with producers whom we're confident can pull it off, because this is a lot of work for everyone. And at the end of the day, right, we want to make sure that us and you are in a situation where it's like, okay, oh man, we're going to do it, right? And then the deliverable deadline is June 30th of 2023. So basically, again, that starts, the next 12 months is the selection process in general. And then beginning next June, like a year from now, 1, 2, 3, or 4, or some number of lucky projects that have been submitted will be underway, and we'll all be excited about it. Now, we will keep our fingers crossed so we don't have another pandemic, because, oh my God, things got derailed so badly. We basically ended up taking many months off, and I know that all y'all here went through some of that too. It was painful, wasn't it? So we are keeping our fingers crossed that we don't have another pandemic next summer. All right. I think, right, I go to Jody here quick before I do, and it's 7:04, so I'm not that far off time, Jill.
Good job, John.
All right, I can hit a post. Any quick questions about the process here, the phases, anything else we talked about? Happy to. What is the scale of funding? Sandra, typically we do that compared to what the budget is. So every project is different. A 90-minute documentary is different than 6 30-minute episodes of TV, is different than a podcast, 10 episodes of podcast. So it depends. It really does depend on which project it is and the scope of the project itself. And a lot of that stuff is going to come through the RFP process when we get a sense of what the budget is. We talk a lot more. Is that okay, Sandra? Any other questions before I leave this? There'll be time if you have other questions and we get to the pitching session. If you have other questions, then we'll definitely tackle them. Okay. Lowest and highest. I'm not sure what you mean. Lowest and highest. You mean dollar figures? I'm guessing. Yes. I'm not at discretion to say. We've set aside between $30,000 and $50,000 to do this. We are doing what we can in a very competitive way. Okay, yeah, in a competitive way to help creative community producers like you guys to make it happen. And I promise you there will be no surprises, right? Because when we go through this entire process, we'll be talking at length after the RFPs, especially after the RFPs, and we get to know each other a lot more. We'll be talking a lot more about how we move forward in the scope of those projects. And sometimes we ask for less, right? Sometimes we ask for it to be scaled down so that we can focus on it. Sometimes we ask for a little bit more. So good questions. Thank you, Sandra. All right, I'm done now. I'm going to hand over to Jody. And are candidates allowed to seek other funding from foundations? Yes, absolutely. We would expect it that candidates are going to need to find funding from other places. They can be foundations, they can be grants, corporations, funders, etc. The only caveat here is that, remember, if you're working on a property that will be broadcast, that there are certain limitations that the FCC imposes upon public media. So, Sesame Street is made possible by viewers like you. Just you can ask Paul and Michael when they talk a little bit about sponsorship. So just know that that money is definitely, those avenues are available to you. We can help you prepare to talk to potential clients or grantors. Just know that if you are lucky enough to get a sponsor, so a commercial, corporate sponsor of some kind, that will have to work on the language, because there are certain things we just are not allowed to say on television. But because you guys are public television watchers, you probably know that already. Donors are possible as well if you have specific donors. Yes, and we are also doing Q&A after Jody's presentation. So I tell you what, this will be the, in other words, okay, let me finish this one question because it's pertinent to the conversation. Yes, the thing about donors is that if they give you money, they need to be identified in the project. Some donors want to get a tax write-off. If they want a tax write-off, the only way they'll be able to do that is to contribute to a nonprofit. And we can talk about a little bit later on how that works. If they just give the money to you, you as an individual are not a nonprofit, so they're not going to get a tax deduction. If that's something that's important to them. Some people it is, some people it's not. If you've got a friend or somebody who wants to help fund your project, the key is transparency. So whether it's an individual, a foundation, a corporate sponsor, if someone gives you camera rentals for free, and we've had this happen in the past, or access to something for free, it needs to be documented and it needs to be identified in the credits. I can't stress enough how important it is that we're transparent with the money, because that's what's expected of KPBS, and that's by extension what will be expected of you.
And,
okay.
And if you make it to the finals, we will definitely go over that aspect of it in detail.
Yes. Okay, so I'm done for now. Thank you very much. I'm going to mute myself and hand it over to Ms. Jody. You're on, Jody.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Jill. I'm Jody Silly. I'm the founder and president of the Film Consortium San Diego. John, I do need you to change slides for me since you're controlling the screen.
Just tell me when.
And I'm also and I was trying to remember when I got involved with the Explore program. I believe it was 2015. Is that what we came up with? The RFP administrator for the KPBS Explore program. If you could go to the next slide. So what the Film Consortium is here to do is assist in managing the process. So we are not, Jody and the team at Film Consortium do not pick who gets selected. They do not pick who ultimately is chosen for the Explore program. We just manage the process and help review the submissions, answer questions about the process, help the producers, and really help you on your proof of concept. If you reach that stage, help you perfect your product, perfect your content before it's presented to the KPBS Explore Committee. So we're here just to manage, assist, support, give feedback, and help producers through the process. I am an educator. I teach. I've taught for many years. We manage a couple film festivals. So, our focus is really helping the producers answer the questions that they need answered to create the best possible proposals or the best possible proof of concept for this process. So think of us as just the middleman. We're the middleman between you and KPBS, and we're here to just assist you as needed. We also have a strong relationship with KPBS. I've worked with KPBS in a variety of capacities for 7 years. And during that time, we got a really good understanding of what KPBS and PBS core values are, what will work on their platforms, what they already have on their platforms, what might not work on their platforms for a variety of reasons. So just keep in mind, we have that sort of institutional knowledge, we'll say, of the channel and the sort of expectations and needs of KPBS that we can help give you guys feedback about. And I say that because oftentimes we get a lot of submissions that say, people are pitching ideas that already exist on KPBS. There's already a show about going to Baja, for example. So pitching a show about going to Baja probably isn't going to work because that already is on the channel and isn't going to add to the variety of shows that they already have. So, there's a piece of this is you guys doing your research, and then there's us there as well to sort of support and help you if you have questions. You can go to the next. So as part of managing that process, John went through this very clearly, so I'm not going to spend too much time on it. I just put our basic deadlines here, and these are as part of this process, we will be managing the submissions, reviewing all the submissions, getting back to you guys, communicating with the people who've submitted based on their, based on where you're at in the process, and letting people know when they're notified, notifying people when your ideas are selected to move forward. So you got the dates here, 9/1, 9/15. We got our round 2 dates, we got our round 3 dates, and we as a Film Consortium are there all the way through that just to help manage and help you with the process. And next. And you, of course, kpbs.org, I can't say it enough. A lot of the information is already on kpbs.org/explore. And all the steps and timeline is up there. And that it isn't completely set in stone. We're still working out a few of the deadlines of when that's going to work for us and for you. So just keep an eye on that. And, just overall, I really suggest looking through the KPBS website in general and looking at the content that's already been produced by Explore participants. I think the best way that you can figure out and make sure that your idea is going to work on this platform is to see the ideas that are already on the platform, see kind of what KPBS funds, and look at your own content from that point of view. Are you offering something that's new, unique, and different? Are you offering something that's, is voices of people who aren't represented yet on KPBS? Are you telling stories of San Diego that, are educational and, we haven't seen yet, or are a take on something, a different, unique take on something we have seen? So I really just heavily suggest, listen, if you're going to submit a podcast idea, listen to the podcasts that KPBS has already funded. If you're going to submit a documentary idea, look at that and watch the documentaries that have already been funded, just so you're coming into this with a clear understanding of the expectations great ideas, combined with understanding of the audience that KPBS already has, combined with uniqueness and diversity, really go a long way. And your research will show. One thing John brought up, and then I'm going to move on, is he said, you can submit several applications. But what I've seen when people submit several applications is they submit 6 underdeveloped submissions. And so they kind of throw things at the wall and hope they stick. But if you have 6 underdeveloped ideas, then none of them are going to stick, really. So I heavily recommend, if you're going to submit several ideas, every one of those ideas needs to be well thought out. Just because you submit 6 doesn't mean you have a better chance of one of them getting selected. Every single one of the ideas has to be very clear and well thought out when you're going to submit multiples. We have our email up here, filmconsd@gmail.com, if you have any questions or you want any feedback. As someone had asked earlier in the meeting, in the chat, if you can pitch to KPBS and get feedback outside of this. We're not doing another session like this, but you can reach out to the Film Consortium and we can give you some feedback, preliminary feedback on your idea before you submit it. Happy to do that. We do that pretty regularly. So, keep that us in mind as an option to run your ideas by before the end date of submissions. And next, I wanted to introduce two of our, is everybody here? 2 of our KPBS Explore producers, Michael Taylor. Both of these came through the RFP process that we're doing right now. Paul, I think, was one of my most memorable participants early on. I was really excited about San Diego's gay bar history and just so impressed with the way that it turned out and the way it came through the process. Michael Taylor also met at the last 2 years ago, I believe, for the Theater Corner. And I guess I don't know all the other projects. I was just involved in the Theater Corner, but Grinch on the radio, Hamlet on the radio, KPBS/Arts. So looking like you've got several things that you were involved in through KPBS Explore, as well as the Caliph with Paul Detweiler as well, another project So, one thing I'd like to say before we have them join us and ask a few questions is what I've really appreciated about this process as well is, the first project that came through Explore on several producers, was part of this process, selected and went through the process and was successful, but also that started the relationship with the producers in KPBS. And then that relationship naturally grew into other projects and other documentaries or other content that basically, just grew from that initial relationship and interaction and content. So keep that in mind. This is a great step into a relationship with KPBS that can turn into other projects, other opportunities down the line. I'm a prime example of that. Here I am working with KPBS on the Explore, and we had our own KPBS Explore show, Film in Diego, 2016. So definitely this relationship is a really valuable piece of this process. So Michael Taylor and Paul Detweiler, how are you guys doing?
Super duper.
Yeah, great, Jody.
Great to see you guys. Hi, Michael. See the bottom half of your face?
Oh my.
There you are. Hi, how are you? I haven't seen you since the Explore selection, so good to see you. I have a few questions I wanted to ask for you folks, just to really want to give the audience here an idea of what it takes to be a KPBS Explore producer, as well as some potential challenges that perhaps your feedback can help them overcome, or maybe help the people that are here avoid some mistakes that you made or you saw people make along the way. So let's start. I'm just going to ask you questions, and I'd love for you both to answer. Please tell us about your program and how you got involved with KPBS Explore. And Michael, why don't you start?
Okay. I can't see myself, so I'm not sure if I'm centered in the frame. Okay. So our program is Theater Corner, and Theater Corner is an interview series where we spotlight actors, producers, directors, BIPOC professionals in the theater, television, and film world. And we went through the process for the Explore program. I would also say it's been an incredible experience. Even though I was producing Theater Corner back in 2016, and our first season didn't start until last year. So Theater Corner was on a website, and we had our own YouTube page. And so I've actually had a good bit of time to develop the show and fine tune it before we actually presented it to KPBS, which I don't know, maybe that was a little advantage or so to really take time and invest in it and to invest in the production value of the show. And what also with Theater Corner, what happened with Theater Corner is once you are on a platform like KPBS, that also makes you eligible for an Emmy. And so after our first season, we submitted for an Emmy and actually received an Emmy in the interview and discussion category. But it started with being on the platform at KPBS that made us eligible. And so these are to give you examples of some of the wonderful things that came out of our relationship with KPBS. That's what the show looks like, and I'll pass it on to I'm sorry, to Paul.
To me, yeah.
To Paul to get a description of his show.
Well, my project was a feature-length or an hour-long length documentary on the San Diego's Gay Bar history, which is also the title of the piece. It's a community profile, really, a community history and profile centered on the roles that the bars have taken over decades as a really foundational part of the LGBT community's development from the post-war years through the 70s and the 80s, when HIV and AIDS, of course, affected the community to a really big extent, and then up to the present and then beyond. So, my idea was to take a more expansive view and profile like a community concern, a community issue, a community history, because I had done documentaries on individuals, but this was a larger piece, and it like Jody and John and were both saying, it's the kind of it touched on a lot of the core values that KPBS wants to see in productions. So it has the diversity, it has the respect for the audience, and the research and the compassion, all of those elements. So if your project has elements like that, or you recognize that in your project, then bring those out, because I think it's really paramount for you to present a project that you're passionate about and that you can really research well and deeply. You have an inside track to it. Then the work on it and the contacts in that environment can really make that piece stronger, and it makes the work just go that much more smoothly. So let's see. I can just also echo what Mike was saying. It's just it brings up a lot of opportunities. It's a really wonderful experience to work with people at KPBS. They make very clear the steps for the benchmarks, the whole procedure for the schedule of the deliverables. They help guide you through the process, and it's just, very like satisfying to work with professional people who are helpful and caring, and they want you to be successful in your vision. So I've been really appreciative of that opportunity to get the Explore program, under my belt, because now and also the experience working with the New Media Rights Center to get the E&O insurance for the piece, and working with Art Neal. He was really helpful, and that was, getting the letter for the lawyer's letter for the insurance, getting the insurance. That was a whole new world for me. But you learn a lot in this whole process. And anyway, so that was my project.
Thank you.
There you go, Art. Hi.
We don't have we're actually going to move on as well with our Neil. So my next question is, what are some of the mistakes you made or challenges you had with the KPBS Explore program?
I could go first, Mike, if that's okay.
Please.
Well, okay. I didn't have any, so that's all I have to say. It went pretty smoothly. Well, John, unless you correct me, but I don't recall having any problems or mistakes.
No, I think you. Well, it's very kind of here. You need to tell everybody about the pitch, though.
Oh, John.
You can tell the story behind the pitch. No, this is a great story, and just goes to show what. No, it's exactly. Well, this is exactly what you talked about a minute ago, as far as doing research and doing what you really care about. No, go ahead. Yeah.
Well, I kind of didn't want to tell the story, but oh well. Okay. Okay. To make a long story short, I came in. I said, "Oh, I saw the advertisement for the Explore program," and I said, "Oh, I'm just going to go in and pitch something for the experience. I'm just going to see how this goes." Okay. So I pitched a project that I had no intention of doing. It was just for me to go through the process, to go speak to, the people at KPBS and the other people on the panel, and, the Film Consortium people, and see what that was like. So it was kind of like a little study on my part. I was doing an exercise. And so I prepared an idea, I wrote it up, and then presented it. And so, John and Jody and the other person were like, "Oh, well, that's interesting. Yeah, you should make sure you have a good host for that idea. The host is critical." Okay, so, well, yeah, thank you. Well, good luck with that. And so I'm walking out the door and my hand's on the doorknob, and then I turn around and I say, "Oh yeah, just a quick question. Anybody doing anything on like LGBT history?" And all of a sudden, John, and they just crumpled up what I gave them, and they threw it away, and they said, "What do you got? What do you got for us? Oh my God, like, you got something?" John's like, "Here's my card. Send me something tomorrow. Email it to me tomorrow." And then I was like, oh, okay. Then I wrote that up, and then it went on, and so that was just not on my mind when I went in for the pitching session for it to actually happen. But I guess the thing was, it's like that's something I know, and something I could do. So you never know. You just never know what your ideas are going to lead to. But I think John recognized that that this first project, just being flat like an exercise, was not going to cut it. So, but yeah, I had no mistakes or really challenges with KPBS at all. Now, I mean, with my crew, that's a different story. But that's for later. Okay.
That's helpful information. But anyway, Michael, what do you?
I guess I can't think of any major challenges or mistakes because, again, we were producing Theater Corner since 2016, and even though we had it on YouTube channel and on our website, we were producing it as if we were producing it for a television platform. That's what I was striking for as a director and the host. We were really taking it very serious and And so we've had a lot of things, a lot of the bugs worked out over that time. I guess maybe one thing I can think of is maybe as a host, I didn't smile enough. But other than that, and I would like to echo what Paul mentioned about the passion. Theater is something that I'm extremely passionate about ever since my mother took me to a Guys and Dolls musical when I was 9 years old. And so I was voted onto the board at the Old Globe Theater here in San Diego. And I noticed that I've been going to the Globe for a long time, and I just noticed that there wasn't, every time I go in the audience, there's less than a handful of people that look like me attending the plays. But there were incredible Black actors on the stage, even in the Shakespeare performances. And it seemed to me like the Black community was not aware of it. And so after being voted onto the board, I decided to start this interview series where I would interview the Black actors that performed on the stage. And so this is something that meant a tremendous amount to me. It was something I was very serious about. And so in an effort to affect the theater going Black community and San Diego. So it was a thing of passion. It was a project of passion. So much so I self-funded the production, and eventually started a film production company, NWB Imaging, which produces Theater Corner. And perhaps also on that note, I would also say if it's a film piece that you're thinking of, really think about the cost of producing something like that. I mean, take a realistic look at the cost, because sometimes when you start dialing down and really looking at the individual things, and I'm speaking about this in the context of producing something of high production value. I mean, you can spend a little bit of money and it'll reflect in your production value. But really take a look at, really start doing an itemized kind of list of what will it actually cost to produce this thing, and insurance, getting insurance and E&O insurance, as Paul mentioned. And this is a very important thing, because you don't want to get to the point where your idea is really good and you get to the proof of concept stage and you figure out that that you can't get the money together to produce it, no matter how well the idea is. So really think through that part of the process.
Well, thank you. I do want to, thank you, Michael. Thank you, Paul. I would like to add, as someone who's produced for KPBS Explore, what Michael just said, very important. Understanding your costs, having a budget, understanding what it's going to take to finish your project is key. Also, just, be aware of your limits. Don't dream up this unproducible thing because you have this platform in front of you. Do tell your story, be as thrifty as possible to make that, but still have a production value that's going to meet the expectations. And the other thing I'll say, just for everyone here that's putting ideas and thinking about ideas that they want to pitch, as a teacher, I've said this forever: access. Like, who do you have access to? What stories do you have access to that other people don't have access to? That is a piece of San Diego that isn't seen on KPBS or in other media platforms. I don't recommend kind of what Paul did in his first pitch, was to sort of make up a food show. I think it was a travel show with kids.
It was a child's nature show.
There you go, a child's nature show. But it wasn't from his heart. It was an idea he thought would fit with KPBS. But I'll tell you what really resonates with KPBS was when you tell a story that you care about with a community that you have access to, that maybe other people do not have access to yet. So think of it, that way. And as someone who, the show I did was Film in Diego, and my life is film in San Diego. So I had access to all these different, film venues and filmmakers, and I was passionate about it. So the money part, very important, but at the end of the day, if you're really passionate and you create some, and you're telling a story that you really care about with people that are maybe not, does not have access to, then even if the money is not the best possible, you don't have all the money you really want, you'll figure out a way to get that thing done. And that's what happened with me, plan ahead, but also be passionate and care about the story you're telling, so that you have that excitement and desire and drive to finish this thing no matter what, because this is not an easy industry. This is not easy to do. So, all right. So thank you, Michael and Paul. We're going to move on. We don't have any questions in the chat for now. And so I'm going to hand this over here to Art Neal. There will be, you can ask questions later in the night if you would like to, but I would love to invite Art Neal up to the podium. I don't know, up to the virtual stage. Art and I go way back. I've been working with Art and since my very first film, I believe, Point of Infection, well, my very first narrative film in 2012. And Art is a great resource in San Diego through New Media Rights, which is just a fabulous organization that has helped a lot of filmmakers in a very important aspect of filmmaking and producing, law and legal and contracts. So take it away, Art.
Absolutely. Hi, everybody. Oh, I'm getting some feedback. Is that coming? Oh, no, I'm not. That's fantastic because that is difficult. So hi, everybody. I'm Art Neal. And with me tonight, it's not just me. I'm not sure I explained that to you, Joe, but it's myself and Natalie Garcia, who's joining us tonight. Natalie is actually an attorney in Florida, an alumni of New Media Rights, who used to work with us years ago, but graduated and became an attorney and is working with us this summer. And she's joining me tonight to kind of tell you a little bit about what we do. And also just the idea of these sessions, I think, is to really just try to help you even just be able to flag some of the issues that come up during the production, right? Like, what do you need to be thinking about throughout the production, and just to help you kind of realize issues even before they arise and know kind of what to do. And so we'll tell you a little bit about our organization, what we do, and then we'll get into some of those kind of key issues. And the way we'll do it is follow through in the way that a production goes. So let me put up I have some slides. So I'm going to go ahead and, could you make me, or am I able to share my screen, Jody, at all? If you make me a co-host or something, I promise not to do.
Or you should be good to go now.
Oh, awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I promise not to misuse the power of screen sharing. Okay, let's see. What do we got? We've got some slides here, and then I'll maximize this. Fantastic. Okay, I'm going to go back here. Okay, so as I said, and let's see, can everybody see my screen okay? Awesome. All right. So it's all about legal assistance, resources for local creators. What we're going to do, as Natalie and I walk through this, and we'll leave plenty of time for Q&A, and we'll kind of go through the basics in a little bit more brief way here, and then we'll give plenty of time for Q&A. I'm going to introduce New Media Rights, and then we'll walk through pre-production, the actual kind of stage of photography and production, and then post-production, and just kind of talk about the different legal issues that come up at each stage of production. And then one of the things that's come up in the past that Jody's asked us to focus on is to just talk a little bit about music and your production. And throughout this conversation, I think you'll hear a number of useful tidbits about copyright and contracts. And I think the most important thing I could say is thinking about some of this, the legal aspect early, is really important. And it just goes such a long way to help you have a program that is set up to succeed, that can be, go on to do multiple seasons. And if you have all that structure there, the business and the legal side, then hopefully you can, reach new audiences, and the program that you're making can really flourish, and you avoid some of these pitfalls. So new media rights, who are we? Well, we provide one-to-one legal assistance that's either free or nominal fee, and I'm talking extremely low nominal fee. So we prioritize folks here in San Diego. And I should say, we really appreciate the opportunity to be here tonight, and I appreciate what KPBS is doing in terms of producing actual local content that helps us learn something about our region. I'm also a consumer of the stuff that you guys are creating as well. And I do really appreciate the chance to work on projects that actually, as Jody was saying earlier, and both of the speakers, Paul and Michael, were saying, I think that you can tell that a lot of the programs that come through, and we've worked with a number of them, the ones that really succeed, it seems to be things that people really know, really have, their heart is really in it. And it's just really, really neat to kind of gain a new insight into our community by what you all are creating. So we have and if you remember nothing else from this presentation, we have a contact form on our website. You can go there, you can write us, you can ask us specific questions, and an attorney will literally read that form, and we will try to help you in whatever way we can. If it's that we can take you on as a client, we will do that. If it's that we need to find somebody to help you, we'll try to do that, or at least get you pointed in the right direction. So one-to-one legal assistance, that's the most important thing for you to know. We work with a variety of filmmakers, YouTubers, podcasters, other types of creatives as well. Those are the groups that are kind of most relevant for this talk, and also people like journalists though, and even some tech startups and things like that. We're based out of California Western School of Law, and I actually teach a law clinic there where we help artists and filmmakers and a variety of creatives. And that's why we can provide, if you're wondering why we're able to provide free or low cost legal assistance, is because we actually are working with, there's 3 attorneys that have a lot of experience there. And then we have a number of law students who come in and get a chance to work firsthand with clients. So that's our main service. We also have a ton of educational videos and guides. We do have a YouTube channel. We've tried our hand a bit at YouTube, and so we do have some video content. We've got a lot of written guides on the site about all sorts of subjects, and so you might want to check that out at newmediarights.org. That's our website. And I should mention also, if you're interested, we also have this book, Don't Panic, which is like kind of a good handy guide to just know what you don't know type of book, right? Everything from forming a company to basics of intellectual property to basics of licensing and making deals, and all the way to the basics of getting into a legal dispute with somebody. And so that's a book that a lot of folks, we just try to take what we've learned over the years and kind of put it into a digestible format there. So in addition to that, we do some public policy work. We try to improve the law in the area that we work. So we do some work at the Copyright Office on federal copyright law. And then we also do some work at the Federal Communications Commission. We worked a bit on net neutrality back in the day when that was a thing. Maybe that'll be a thing again this year. We'll find out. But as I said, we're independently funded. Also, we mostly get grants. We actually just found out we got a grant today from the Prebys Foundation. That was very exciting. And we're based at California Western School of Law. So what we'll do now, and I think I kind of laid it out. So right now we're going to move through the stages of production, and we're going to describe some of the legal services that we might be able to provide along the way throughout the production, and even just to flag some of those things that you might need to be thinking about as you move through the production. Again, I would reiterate that thinking about this stuff early, right? Not when you're doing the post-production or you're trying to get out there and oh, I'm finally going to a film festival. Maybe now's the time that I need to circle back and get those contracts written. Now's the time I need to get the music license. That's not the time. The time is way back at the beginning of the production to kind of think these things through. And when you have some of those agreements ready to go for your team, for your crew, maybe you're able to avoid some of those problems that come up along the way. Now, there might be some agreements you want to figure out some of the finance aspects. So you might want, obviously you'll want to have that written down. You might want some kind of co-production agreement. Maybe you're collaborating with another production company or another individual, and you want that clearly defined in an agreement. There's a number of reasons why you want a written agreement. I think some of those any of us who have done any sort of business over the years, we always realize when we need the contract at the, when things kind of break down, right? Not when things work out well. And so it's really, there's some things that are obvious about these agreements. Like when I say above the line, I'm usually talking about folks who are involved earlier in a production, who have more of a kind of long-term stake in a production, in taking it all the way from, say, the early stages all the way through distribution. Some of these folks might have more even of a creative role. And obviously you want to get things straight in terms of, if you're hiring somebody, are you hiring them as an employer independent contractor? If you're hiring somebody, how much are they going to get paid, and what are their actual duties? What are they expected to do? And so that's obviously there's the basics of the services they're providing to you and then how much you're paying them. But there's other reasons why you want agreements. And this goes for both above the line producers, directors, writer folks, as well as below the line folks. And one of the key reasons you want an agreement for anyone you work with is that if they have any kind of creative role, there can be a copyright issue, an intellectual property issue that comes up. One of the funky things about copyright law is that even if you pay somebody, right, whether you pay somebody or not, if that person is the person who creates a creative work, they're the ones that actually own that work under copyright law. Does that make sense? So let's think about this for a second. Let's say that you hire somebody to come out and you're like, and it's actually somebody who's, say, more below the line crew, and these are more folks who might show up for the day to do makeup, or they're doing sound, or they're doing light, or they're lighting, or they're doing they're actually just doing photography. And so let's say somebody's doing the video recording, they're holding the camera and they're making the recording, and you're thinking, oh, okay, well, I just had them out for a day, I paid them a couple $100, don't have an agreement with them. But does anybody know, who actually owns the recording if nothing's in writing? Right? Who actually owns the recording if nothing's in writing? And the answer is that camera person owns that recording if nothing's in writing. That is the default way the law works. Even if you paid them a lot of money, it needs to be written down in a signed writing that they are actually either assigning, or somebody's probably read this in a contract you've seen before, they're doing a work for hire, right? So that work for hire is just when they record it, the rights automatically vest in you as, say, the production company who hired them. And so if there's any kind of creative work going on, that is writing, illustration, crew that's doing sound, crew that's doing visuals, there's intellectual property that's being created there. And just for long term, you want to be able to use and develop that copyrighted work. And so it's good to have an agreement to make sure you own it. Also, when you get to the distribution stage and you want to go to, say, a film festival, or you want to take it to KPBS, I can tell you that they're going to say, all right, we're happy to distribute this. Here's our contract. And in almost every contract, whether it's a Netflix, KPBS, Amazon, HBO, whatever it is, they're going to say, okay, you need to represent and warrant that you own everything you're giving to us, right? And you're going to say, oh my gosh, I want this distribution agreement. So, here's my signature. And you want to be able, though, to actually be able to say that with, confidently, because if you don't actually own it, then you're kind of setting yourself up to where somebody might say, oh, well, I'm actually, the owner of this footage, and I never really, I'm the one that actually owns this, and you can kind of create some or leave the opportunity for some disputes later on. I would just say as an aside before we kind of move on, I do want to say that sometimes when folks are just getting started on a production, there's a tendency to work with folks that people know or friends and things like that, and that is great. You know somebody and you work with them, and that's fine. But I still think agreements are helpful in those situations, because there can be disagreements about whose idea it was and whose show it is, and and so you want that clear from the outset, because those kinds of agreements do come up. And if the disagreements come up, you can actually have a piece of paper and say, well, this is what we agreed on, this is what we're supposed to do, and you actually have something to kind of tell everybody what the path should be. So other than that, let me see if I can. So other than that, I mean, yeah, a lot of it is about making sure that you own the intellectual property, making sure you and making sure that you just have the duties of these individuals clearly defined, and that they know clearly how they're how they're going to be compensated if they're going to be, say, paid or something like that. So there's a lot to do pre-production, and it's also just a great time to think about what you're going to need to do and think about for legal stuff when you get to the production and post-production. And for that, we're going to turn to Natalie, who's going to tell us a little bit about some of the legal considerations at the production and post-production stage.
Thanks, Art. Hi, everyone. Can you all hear me okay? Yeah, awesome. So I'm excited to talk to all of you. As Art mentioned, I was actually a clinical student a few years ago, and I became an attorney in Florida, and I'm a provisional attorney in California now. So with that, we'll get into just some of the different areas that we can help you at New Media Rights. And I'll speak to you generally and also give you a couple examples of what happens with these different types of agreements, so that they can kind of guide you through potential pitfalls or just areas that, I always tell people when I'm advising clients, you don't have to know the law, but if your gut says something's off, there might be something off. So it's something that you can that will trigger for you to bring to someone like us to help you with. So I want to talk to you a little about recording laws in general. So they vary state by state, and it's very important to get educated on these laws. So for instance, California is a two-party consent state. And what this means is that you cannot record someone without their consent. And consent, although it sounds very straightforward, it's of course not when you're talking legal terms. So the consent that you need is twofold. The first is you need consent to actually film the individual that you're filming. And you also need consent to then go and use the content that you filmed. And of course, the best way to memorialize this is through a written agreement, because there is a clear understanding of all the terms and what rights are being assigned or granted over from one party to another. While it is not recommended, it is possible to obtain consent by filming a person if they say that they agree to be filmed, that the content of the film can be used. Another good place, just so you all know, if you go on the New Media Rights website, there is a guides section, and there's pretty good material in there that just kind of guides you a bit into, again, just trying to just issue spot some of the potential pitfalls that can happen in the future. And then in terms of video and photo releases, I just want to walk you through a few different types of agreements that are important that we are able to assist in when you have a need for them. And the first is individual releases. So individual releases give you as a filmmaker the right to film another person, to create your work, and then use that footage in your film. And oftentimes what it does is it grants you the right to the recordings that you're creating, the creative works of those recordings. If you did, say, derivative works of that particular recording, you can use that recording oftentimes through contractual language that allows you to use it at your discretion and how you see fit. In these agreements, the individual agrees that they will not sue you for certain claims that they may be able to bring absent these types of agreements. And they acknowledge that you own the rights to all of the work that you are creating, despite the fact that they are a part of these. And you see this a lot in documentary type films. And just if as a takeaway for these types of agreements, just think of individual rights agreements are really about the people in your film. So if you have a key person that you're filming, they're the person that's the focus of this individual release. Another type of agreement is a materials agreement. And this is really, it's twofold. There's the people aspect, and then there's the things, the photographs, the visual images. Say you are doing a documentary on someone and they have a family photo that they want to put in the footage of the film, then these are the materials that you are essentially asking for specific parameters to be able to use in your footage. And this is really about, any third-party content. To think of works of art in the documentary of an artist. If you were doing something like that and they have all of their pieces in there, you would need the right to use those. This agreement is really meant to provide you peace of mind so that, as Art mentioned, when you are asked to represent and warrant that you have the right to use all of the materials in your film, you feel more comfortable and more confident saying that you do, and you have agreements to prove that you have those rights. It's important to, from a materials perspective, let's say that you are out filming on the field, and some of these agreements are as straightforward and as short as a one-pager that really memorializes all of the terms that you need. And those are great to have in hand, because if you go record something for your film and you have the agreement in hand, you could just hand it over when these types of third-party content are being used for footage, and you'll walk out of there feeling a lot more comfortable that you have the legal rights to use these types of materials. Another thing that I wanted to touch on a bit is when you're shooting and there's crowds in the background. So the key to that is, and these are really just pointers for you all to be able to identify, but the key with crowds is if someone is identifiable, at that point, you should probably consider getting a release from them. So if you are shooting a scene and you have 5 people or a group of people in the background and all you see is their backs, there's nothing identifiable about them, you can't see their faces, you can't tell who this person is, then it's less likely that you need a general release, because you don't really have their likeness or image. And I'll get into that in a second. So the next thing along those same lines to segue is the right of publicity is really important, which is the right of an individual to control the commercial use of your own identity. And the reality behind this is we all have this right, and your identity is based on your name, your likeness, your image. Think of celebrities, that's why their information is protected. And this is just a part of basic recording laws. So a big part of it, to really understand it in plain English, for lack of a better term, is, do people know that they're being recorded, and is their image being used to their liking? And that can mean a lot of things. That's very broad, but are you not presenting them in a false light and using them in a light that doesn't seem appropriate to them? And this becomes particularly important when you use this for commercial purposes. So when you're thinking of posters, ads, trailers, it's very different to have a 30-second clip of someone in a full film versus using 30 seconds in a trailer, which may paint them in a different light that may not be as acceptable to them as you would think it is. So in order to better protect yourself, these agreements kind of outline those rights and those obligations and whether you have free reign to do what you want with your footage or not. The last important agreement that we work on pretty frequently that I wanted to bring up to you all is location agreements. And these are used to grant you the right to enter into private property for the purpose of recording content. This type of agreement usually covers what you must pay in the event that there's some damage to the property caused during your film, or some of them just make broad representations that say, we give you this property in this way, and when you leave, we expect to get it in return in the same way that we gave it to you. It also grants you the right to use the actual film that you're filming in that location. And just something to keep in mind is that some areas do require permits, and this could be at a city level or certain ordinances in areas or towns of a state. And I can give you an example. The city of San Diego requires that some filmmakers complete a filming registration form. And this is depending on the settings outlined. And they do have a guide on their website that kind of guides you, and they'll ask you some questions like, where are you filming? Is it private property? Is it a city or a park? Are you blocking right of way to pedestrians or individuals? And just based on these different factors, you may be required to get a permit to use those. And that's it for this slide. Art, if you can just go to the next slide. Thank you. Just briefly to touch on some of this. So one of the big areas that we're able to assist a lot of clients on is pre-publication review and clearance. So if you're using something in your film and it belongs to a third party, we help navigate how you are able to use this content with less legal exposure or any type of just uncertainty as to whether you have the rights to use it. We kind of help you navigate and guide you through an analysis to determine through fair use, or if we see any potential copyright pitfalls or any trademark issues that you can be infringing on someone else's trademarks, then we try to help you navigate through those areas. The next thing that's very important that was mentioned earlier by a few of the speakers is E&O insurance. And this protects you from liability. And it's also more and more frequently distributors and film festivals are starting to require E&O. So Art will go into a little more detail in the next couple slides on E&O, but just something that it's pretty frequent that we work on E&O insurance letters. The next thing is distribution contract review. So the point of distribution contract reviews is really to help you understand the entire deal, right? So what in a licensing agreement, is it exclusive? Is it non-exclusive? What type of media are you protecting? Is this purely for video? Is it a streaming service? Do you need to make sure that you are protected in certain geographic regions and are able to license in those areas versus not others? How long does the license last? And those are just some of the examples of the important points you have to pay attention to and that we do when we're reviewing distribution contracts for you. And then the last thing I'll touch on is DMCA takedowns. So this is another big area that we are able to assist clients on. And if you have a claim that your work is either copyright infringing or you think it may be infringing on someone else's copyright, or if you are concerned that someone is infringing on your own work, we can assist with these types of inquiries on both sides. Just as Art said, we have a contact form where you can submit your questions and we're able to have one of the attorneys on staff just to look through the issues, and to the extent we can take you on as a client, we do, or otherwise just the goal is to try and help educate anyone, with the information that we have over the years. And with that, I'll give it back to Art.
Thanks so much, Natalie. Okay, so you've completed your production, your series or your documentary, and you're ready to share it with the world. And the trick is, it's been mentioned a couple times that you might need errors and omissions insurance. There are two reasons why you really need errors and omissions insurance once you go to distribute. Beyond, if you're distributing anywhere beyond sort of YouTube or maybe self-distribution, and you still might want E&O insurance, you might just have to get E&O insurance. But the basic reason you'd want it is if you did your due diligence, you got your materials releases, you got your individual releases, but you can't stop somebody from giving you trouble legally, right? Or coming after you in a lawsuit, which hopefully is not going to happen in your production. But if it does, you've got those things in place. But if something happens and they can be these lawsuit, these types of situations can be expensive. So the E&O insurance, the main purpose is really to help you in those situations, help pay for an attorney, help you defend yourself if somebody does come after you, right? That's the main point, right? Is to cover you and maybe even your distributor if there are situations where whatever you're putting out there, and sometimes when you're really trying to, especially on the more journalistic type of work, you might be you might be shining a light that maybe certain powers that be, corporate or government are not too keen about, and you might face that. So the E&O insurance is there for that reason. The second reason, though, as everyone has said, like it's just required by a lot of film festivals now, and it's just required by most distributors. If you're going to distribute on their whether it's their broadcast or whether it's their digital space, they're all by this point really going to require that you have E&O insurance. And so it's just something that's demanded of you. That typically, and this is where I think it gives you a real peek into what fundamentally is going on with the production from kind of a legal and creative standpoint. I would characterize like your production, if you think about it, it's really two categories of material. There's the material that you yourself are creating, right? The footage that you're recording and whatever you're creating yourself, right? And you, luckily, as far as like, there's this whole idea of chain of title that I have here at the bottom of this slide, right? And chain of title is really important to these insurance companies and to distributors. And the idea is, do you have the rights to what you are trying to distribute? And as far as the stuff you created, boom, you own it, usually pretty easy. But anything else, right? Music that's in the background, photos, video, etc. You need to have a reason for using it. That could either be have a materials release, a contract in place that maybe you hired a composer and had them compose music, have a contract in place and you now own or have a license to the material. Or there's another way, a narrow way called fair use, where in some circumstances you can use unlicensed third-party content if it fits into this kind of narrow exception of fair use. But in that case, you really have to talk to an attorney. Luckily, you have one here in town. That's us that specializes in fair use. And we review literally clip by clip, and then we'll provide a letter and we'll say to the insurance company, this looks like good fair use. The pluses to that is that the insurance company will sometimes not issue it without the letter. And sometimes it might help with the price of everything. So E&O insurance. And then the last thing I want to cover really, or just bring up is music. This always comes up for folks. And I'm not going to try, as Natalie said, I'm not going to try to, in fact, every time I have to do a music copyright issue, I have to sort of re-educate myself. And there's so many little wrinkles of music copyright law and sort of rabbit holes you can go down. I think it's important to just flag it as a challenging space, right? And so if you have music that you want to use in your production, realize a couple basic things. I think first of all, realize that music, the reason everyone says, oh, it's kind of complicated, it's because every piece of music that you hear on the radio or on Spotify, typically there are two sets of rights in one song, right? So you say song, but when you say hear a song on Spotify, there's the musical composition, and that typically is like the written composition. Like if you were to look at the music on a page, like notes on a page and lyrics written, it's the written down music. That's one set of rights. And then there's the sound recording, which is the actual recording itself, right? And they often, not always, but especially for very popular music, they're often owned by two different parties. So the actual written music and lyrics, typically owned by the music publisher. There's a whole other set of licenses that you need to use it. Sound recording, typically owned by the record label, typically need a master use license to use those. And so essentially with those, if you go to ask for a music license, I would just say, make sure you have the right set of, the set of rights that you need. Sometimes people think like, oh, I'm just going to have somebody play this song instead of using the recording. And they think they kind of went around the recording issues. But remember that you still could have a composition issue, right? Like if somebody's performing a composition, you might still have a composition issue. It can be even a little more complicated because I don't have it fresh in my head, but I know that there's some kind of blanket license that PBS has. But my recollection of every time I've ever seen it is that it has mostly to do with the broadcast piece, and that you have to be kind of careful. And I don't know if it's been updated, and John, but the point is, if you're going to rely on a blanket license, know what the rules of that is, the limits of that. And one of the things that I always try to help folks think about is, you might be careful about just leaning on the blanket license, because if you want to distribute in a bunch of different places, right? If you leaned on the blanket license and it can only be distributed, say, just for example, I'm not saying this is it, but for example, it can only be distributed on broadcast radio, because you didn't have the right, you didn't have a license to do any distribution elsewhere, then you might be a little bit limited on where else you can distribute, or you need to kind of change it when you distribute elsewhere. And so it's just that's something to think about too, although it's also a benefit to have that blanket license. So that's something to keep in mind. And then I would just say, when you do go out there, if you do try to get a music license, make sure if you're using sound recording to get sound recording composition rights you need. And then also just make sure you get the actual rights you need. So if you're trying to go to some big record company and get a license from them, you need to be careful with that, just because they will sometimes give you a very limited license that says you can use this in festivals, but then you can pay this bigger fee to use it for streaming down the line. And so just keep an eye and see, does the distribution, or does the music contract that you do, does it actually give you the rights that you need? You can try to negotiate where possible, try to explain, the nature of the production, and maybe you can get, a little bit better price. A lot of times music, especially the larger music companies, Sony Music, Warner Music, they're just going to quote you like the highest fee possible right off the bat. And so, try to orient them to what might be reasonable. I guess with music, I'll leave you with just realize the rights could be a little more complicated than you think. Even if it was, say, like, hey, this was a local band and the people from the band, they say it's fine to use the song or whatever, it might be with a record company, right? They might tell you yes, but it might actually be owned by a record company. There are some various, services you can go to try to find, music rights holders like ASCAP and BMI have catalogs. The Copyright Office has an online catalog you can search. And the other thing I would say is there are sites that have some openly licensed content that, and other sites that are maybe clearer terms that you can like purchase the music. One of the sites that I have seen that people use a lot is Incompetech.com. If you've never seen them before, you'll see them appear on a lot of background music for YouTube videos and things like that. So if you've never seen that, you might check it out. They have he has a lot of various like styles of music, and you can it's very simple. You either use the Creative Commons license and you can use it for free as long as you credit the creator, Kevin MacLeod, or you can literally pay, I think it's like $35, or maybe it's gone up a little, and you can just use the song in the background of your work, and that's it. Like nothing to worry about after that, right? So he makes it really simple because he's the composition and sound recording owner. So, something to think about when you're doing music. I know that music can be just so fundamental to a project. And so other than that, some people do, I have worked with a few people locally who hire composers, and we do composer agreements as well. And that's something to really, that's something you could also do as well. I think we can leave it there, although I just want to say that as far as registration of your, like the work you create, whether it's a video or a film or a series or a podcast, you typically will have copyright rights in that. And so if you want though to ever be able to enforce your rights in a meaningful way, once it's created, I do recommend registering your work. It really typically only costs $55 to register a work. And, if it's something that you worked on for a long time and something you really think has a lot of value in it, go register it. Because when the time comes and you want to kind of pursue your rights or enforce your rights at one time or another, you get a lot of benefits. You can see here, these damages and attorney's fees. The point is that an attorney will be more likely to even take your case, right? And consider taking your case if you have registered. And it really, that's something you really can do yourself by just going to the copyright.gov website. With that, if we have any time for Q&A, we can open it up a little bit. I'm glad to try to answer some questions, but just remember newmediarights.org. That's where the contact form is.
So I will just add one thing to what you were saying, Art, about our license agreement and the blanket license agreement. And there was a time where I would say that our agreement was definitely more sort of like catch-all. We try to just catch all. We've actually updated our agreement to be a little bit more specific and kind of platform oriented, if you will. And so we do typically, and I put this in the chat, that we do typically ask for both broadcast and digital rights for both audio and video. And with the broadcast, including live linear streaming for video, that would be like our channel on the PBS video app or YouTube TV. So that is a digital broadcast stream, but it is still a broadcast. And then for digital, we typically ask for on-demand streaming, which would apply to both podcast, web series, and your like a documentary type piece of content as well. And then also for social media, so that we can use excerpts from if we're not going to put a web series specifically on a social media platform, we may want to be able to use an excerpt from your piece of content in order to promote it across our platform. So that is typically what we'll ask for in our license agreement. And we have a much more specifically defined, like the contract lays it out in a little bit more specifically defined way. So it's hopefully even easier to read than it was before. So we're not trying to trick anybody. And were there any other questions from anyone?
Or just any questions in general? Would love to take a moment to answer anything that's pending.
I think we got everything that was in the chat. And I'm looking for hands up, but I'm not seeing any.
Well, Art was very thorough. Art and Natalie were very thorough. So.
All right. Thank you.
And, I would love to just emphasize, the earlier you think about this, the better. It is much, much easier to get somebody to sign a release before the work is done than it is to go hunt them down and have them sign it after the work is done. People move on to their projects. They start thinking about it, questioning. It's just, before you do any work with anybody, there should already be an agreement in place so that you're not wasting their time, they're not wasting their time, and that there's no future problems that'll come up because there was no signatures or no agreement. So highly recommend thinking about all this. And, again, I've worked with Art for many years, getting great contracts for all the productions that we do. So really appreciate you coming by. Thank you, Natalie. I hear you're on the East Coast, so it's kind of late over there.
A little bit.
A little bit. So thank you for joining us. And
thank you. Thank you for having us.
Thank you, Art.
Thank you.
Thanks, Art. Thanks, Natalie.
Bye, everybody.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye. Thanks for what you do.
Thank you for what you do.